turning a moment into momentum is another big thing for a professional, right? You have a big moment, but you move that thing forward. It becomes this through line of why you did what you did and who you are is true. Living that true life is the important through line.
Welcome to the Testpiece podcast. This podcast is about all things high-level climbing. How to go from good to great. I'm your host, Joshua Horsley. I've been climbing for over 30 years. We recently updated our Patreon, and now you get exclusive content from the guests that you love. You get your episodes before everyone else, and they're ad-free. Try it out now at patreon.com/testpiece with a free 7-day trial. Okay, let's start the show.
Tyler Willcutt, welcome to the pod, man. How are you doing?
Doing well. Yeah, doing well. Thanks for having me.
Tyler, I got to tell you, I'm a little disappointed with your background. Last time we chatted, you had an incredible giant tiger. Maybe it was like a white tiger. I feel like you had a lot of buttons undone on your shirt. You looked like you were some sort of like kingpin from Scarface, but this is fine. This is fine. You got half dome in the background. Yeah, it's okay.
I almost wore a suit and tie for you.
Ooh, dude, you would have been the first. I wear my uniform. I always have the same black sweater, but that just doesn't quite have the gravitas of a suit and tie. Tyler, you told me this is your first podcast, and you're typically someone who's behind the scenes helping the famous of the famous go on amazing podcasts like mine. So I'm just psyched for you to make your debut and step into the limelight yourself. Because Tyler, you are the agent or manager. I don't know which term you prefer for some of the biggest talents in our sport. Athletes like Alex Honnold, Chris Sharma, Natalia Grossman. There's a bunch of others, but all of them have been on this podcast. So I just wanted to, shout them out. The agency you're part of is called RXR Sports. And I just wanted to start out by hearing a little bit more about that company.
Yeah. RXR Sports. RXR is a talent agency representing athletes in the endurance, outdoor space, kind of the adventurer storytellers. Like you said, there's a lot of climbers. We started with Jimmy Chin as athlete number one. And the founder, Jonathan Retzek, and his wife, Jonathan, was a former professional cyclist. So he started the USA cycling circuit and really found his path of being like, oh, what it's like to be a professional athlete, the difficulties of it, trying to make it in that space. Kind of shifted his world into the Hollywood talent agency space where he was working with actors. Like he was working with Marge Simpson, the voice actor for Marge.
Whoa.
And,
okay.
And was just an assistant to that agency and decided to build his own kind of world and start with this Jimmy Chin. And then it led to the Alex Honolds and Emily Harringtons and, all this world.
Oh yeah. Jimmy Chin, Emily Harrington. I've heard of them. Yeah. It's kind of interesting. You just said, climbing, endurance, like these like outdoor sports. Like what area of media is climbing part of? Like what are the sports that are kind of similar in the outdoor world that you would lump us in with?
What I think of ours is mostly like surf and skate, which are the three newest, including climbing in the Olympics, as like the emerging sports. There's a lot of culture to them, a lot of grit. It used to be where the weirdos would hang out. Now it's kind of shifted a bit to having, fewer weirdos in the mix. But yeah, I think that surf skate is that. But for our world at RXR, it's been a lot of this endurance runners, a lot of cyclists, BMX, Tour de France kind of world. The big alpinists and mountaineers, which is just adjacent to our kind of like little rock climbing hub. But each of these things have a little bit of an offshoot to them. When we say climbing, typically people think of like Alex Honnold and free solo. That might be the only rock climber they've ever heard of in the general main public. I like to use the reference of like, you probably only know one swimmer's name. And it's probably Michael Phelps. And, there's just one person that kind of goes beyond the sport into the outer realm. And typically that's the one person who's kind of got the biggest achievement or the biggest moment or the biggest story that has kind of transcended the endemic space.
Ooh, I can't wait to get more into that whole transcending into the broader market. I think it's interesting that there's these whole sports that have emerged from skiing or skating or surfing where I kind of feel a kinship to them because it seems like the world dictates the platform on which to display our abilities. Like if you look at football, not that there's anything wrong with football. It's just like, this is the field. This is how, these are the rules on which to showcase who you are and have your self-expression there, which is cool too. But I always thought to myself, if I wasn't a climber, I could be a skier, I could be a surfer, and it would just be a similar way to let the environment kind of shape our sport. And I also love the adventure side of it too. Like I think that when I think of endurance running or something and they're doing 100 miles out in the mountains by themselves in the middle of the night, it's like, there's just something badass about all those sports.
Yeah, totally. No, I think a lot of these people inspire you in the sense of reminding you of the natural world and the ways to play within it. It's so fun to go out and play at all these big spaces. And, not to bore you with this Cotopaxi experience, but I went and climbed Cotopaxi, the big mountain, with Emily Harrington, Adrian Ballinger for their wedding. It was crazy. There's like this group of 40 of us. Most of them are professional athletes. Jim Morrison, Alex Honnold, Hillary Nelson, all these mega athletes in the mix as your guides and leaders and people on Cotopaxi. And I've been working with professional athletes for the past 12 years, 14 years almost in this space. And so many documentaries about big mountains, so many athletes that I help get gear for these big projects. And I find myself hiking at midnight up the mountain and the sunrise starts to come up. You're just like, oh my God, this is nothing what I thought it was going to be like. And I had been so close to this world my whole life, but had no idea what that world was actually like. It was terrifying up there. It was really scary, super intense. I thought it was going to be more of like, oh yeah, you just do this, just hike the mountain. But the real risk factors are so intense. And the wind was like nothing I've ever experienced. We almost had to turn around with these like 80-mile-an-hour winds. But it was this moment of me being like, oh, I thought I knew what this world was because I work in this world. And then I found myself actually standing there on the mountain. And it's like, whoa, these risks are super severe. Like it's unbelievable what's actually happening up here.
Do you think they were just hosing you? They're like, Tyler is just our agent and he thinks he's a hardcore climber. We're just going to drag him up this and like scare the crap out of him. Because Tyler, I haven't mentioned yet that 10 years ago, you were on the cutting edge of climbing. You have established multiple FAs of mid 514. You were then more of a dirtbag, and we can talk about the fringe athletes in a moment, but you're a good climber. You've been around and done it. I just think it's funny that they're like, oh, let's go take Tyler up this and scare the crap out of him.
No, it wasn't quite like that. It was like Emily's dad came with us. We had tons of new people and top tier folks. It was just like Emily and Adrian's wedding party. So if you want to join, you can come early and hike this mountain. And they didn't anticipate that many folks. And I think there was like 40 people that came with us. Many of us had never been at altitude like that at all. And so we spent 10, 12 days. My two colleagues went with me, the founders, partners of RXR, Jonathan and Ben. They both went with me. So there's a bunch of new folks right in the mix of the top tier. So it was this beautiful blend. So like our guides were, the best of the world. But no, the realization of that it's serious up there. It is life and death serious up there. And we all say it, but it sounds trite until you find yourself standing there and you're like, whoa, this is really serious.
Every time I go and do some other discipline in climbing, let's face it, I'm a dad of 2 young kids and I'm busy. And so a lot of my hardcore climbing is just in the gym, 10 feet off the ground. And then I'll go and, rope up and do some multi-pitch. And I just look down and I'm like, okay, I'm on 5'6", but if I fall right now, I know I have a rope. I'm pretty sure I'll die. It's like I'm 30 feet above my last piece. And then you'll look over and some guy like Alex will just be romping up it without a rope, just as a warm up, just having fun. And you go, wow, those people, what it really is the best of the best are doing things that are mind blowing. You can see those pretty pictures. You can watch on the movies and then you get up there and it's wild what they're doing. And that's cool. You got to see it a little bit up close firsthand.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, Tyler, let's go back to that time when you were a dirtbag. I'm not going to say you were one of the fringe people. It is funny because we've both been climbing a long time. And when I started climbing, it was a fringe sport. I mean, maybe it still is, but the people that it attracted were a little different from today and didn't always have that broad appeal. And you started out a long time ago. You were in the South, and just take me back to being a dirtbag, and how did you end up now representing the biggest talents in our sport?
Yeah, so I grew up in Alabama and came from a very untraditional family for climbing. Like my folks were very blue collar world. Came up kind of, my dad owned a sign company, so he was putting up signs in front of buildings and putting the big poles up. And so we were always kind of playing at height. We were on ladders and bucket trucks and cranes, so always kind of have an exposure of height. And actually found a black diamond harness in my basement while I was cleaning out one summer, just helping my folks clean the basement out. And I found this black diamond harness in the bag. And I was like, what is this? And they're like, oh, it's a rock climbing harness. And my uncle had found it outside of a rec center at the university that he was working at, gave it to my dad thinking he could use it at for his crane and for bucket truck use. And turns out it was a black diamond rock climbing harness. And then me and my buddies took it and started going rappelling. And we like rappelling off retainer walls and out of trees and off of people's porches. Like, like I was destined to be a rappeller my whole life. I had all the different devices, the safety aids. We were going front, down, and side. We were doing all kinds of crazy things, rappelling for a while, like much longer than you should as an activity. And then we actually went to a climbing area to go rappelling. And I showed up and everybody's climbing up. And we were just like, what are y'all doing, man? There's just, the real action is from the top down, and we didn't know. And we bought one pair of shoes that fit kind of all of us. And we'd have to wear thicker socks or a couple pairs of socks and like started climbing in that sense. So, I lived 40 minutes away from Horsepins 40. I had all these amazing places nearby, but never came across my mind that climbing was an option, in the South.
What year is this? Like, when is this era?
Right at the end of my high school. So 2005 or 6-ish, I started climbing. I graduated high school in 2007. And so it's nearly 20 years now of climbing.
First of all, you're the first person that's come on the pod and is like, I started out by extreme rappelling. It's just, I can just imagine going to a crag and like looking over and being like, who are these Gumbies rappelling down this thing? And then to find out 20 years later, it's you, Tyler. It's just a hilarious start. But I mean, so you got a pair of shoes. There must have been some climbing gyms around. I know that we have a ton of mutual friends, people who are really successful in climbing. There's Brooks Walker. Shout out, Brooks. Love you, man. There's Michael Rosado. I have a hunch that there's a bunch of other ones that are from the South in that era too, because you guys were a tight-knit community.
Yeah, that community can't be missed with the story that how I got here. It was certainly a huge part of that community coming together. But yeah, the 2005-07 range, there wasn't really a climbing gym. There's rec centers. So it was, you could go to the university and you could pay to climb at the like university wall, which was the classic, like what you'd find at a mall or something, old school, terrible setting. So we'd go there, but the outdoor routes were quite good nearby. Like I said, Horsepins 40 minutes away. It's incredible. But we didn't find those places. There weren't guidebooks. There wasn't a community hub. It was the very early days, but right when I started, two guys started a climbing gym, First Avenue Rocks. And that was Adam Henry, who is a legend of the Southern climbing, a big mentor of me, and was a great friend, still kind of this fatherly figure to multi-generations of climbers in the South. He's been a fantastic kind of role model. And then Joe Ortega, who now started Birmingham Boulders, the gym that exists today down in Birmingham. The First Avenue Rocks was built, and that became our church. That was our hub. That's where all these like-minded individuals started to congregate. And there was something special at that time. The social media isn't what it was today. It was just this group of people always out at the boulders, always out with lanterns and headlamps every evening, coming to the gym to hang out, creating these events. And yeah, really just giving us like a place to play and grow with great mentors at the helm, being Joe and Adam. And that really fostered this incredible group of people that were all really bright lights at the time and continue. They've all scattered now and continue to be bright lights where they've ended up, as we've said.
Well, Brooks told me that you were a big part of keeping that community together and pushing it forward. And I want to say that he mentioned something about like you running a nonprofit or organizing a nonprofit and something about bolting. What was that about?
Yeah. So when I first started climbing, it wasn't a couple years in, I found myself kind of in the mix of the guys who were doing the most inspiring things, leading with bolting routes, putting up new routes in the South. And I kind of got under their wing and they brought me in, and immediately I saw all of these really old bolts, like terribly put in, terribly bolted routes. And we'd have trail days and build the trails, but there was nobody doing anything for bolts. And some of these had been bolted 15 years before that, tons of rain in the South, not using the correct hardware in the first place, no stainless. And we were like, well, who's replaces these? And they were like, we do. There's no organization going around replacing these. So we started throwing together fundraisers with that community we're talking about, either at the gym or we created like a 150-foot slip and slide at Horsepins 40, where we'd have a summer gathering. It was like beer and barbecue and suds, where we would all like slide down these huge tarps and have slope and slide. And we'd raise money for bolts and anchors, and people would, $5 for a beer. That's a bolt and anchor. Yeah, we started there, and I was like, oh man, this is the future. We're going to rebolt the world. We want to have the best sustainable bolts that we can all over the world. And I made my way all the way. This is like 2008 or 9. Like, I'm 19, 20-year-old kid, been traveling around, living out of a truck or a car or people's couches, just climbing all the time. And I drive to Boulder, Colorado to meet up with Brady Robinson, who was the executive director of the Access Fund at the time. And I have this really serious meeting, and I'm just like a good old boy from Alabama coming in, wanting to do the blue collar work, of like, let's rebolt these routes, and sit down. And I had no plan. I had no structure. I had no idea what I was really trying to do, but I knew that there was a problem here that wasn't being addressed. And I'm raising my hand going, how do we fix this? And basically Brady sent me on my way going like, we're not ready to take on this level. There's too many unknowns here to try to, we know this is a thing we got to fix. And now today they have a vertical trail crew, I think is what they call them, not just doing the trail on the ground, but let's fix the routes themselves too. And I left the Access Fund that day with this like disdain of feeling like I didn't get to do what I wanted to do. And we ended up calling this nonprofit that was actually never a licensed nonprofit. We started calling this group the Action Fund. Where I was like, all right, Brady, we take action and we will go and do this ourselves. And that led us to making, I think we replaced over 1,000 routes across the country.
Wow.
We kind of like put anchors and bolts and would run fundraisers and travel. And it was really just an excuse to play and bring awareness to bolts and anchors and, raise a little money and help the local equippers go out and do their thing.
You just wanted to repel some more. You were just dude, thank you. I don't think that people realize how much effort goes into bolting routes, rebolting route. This is like people just go outdoors and they're like, oh, this is a gym. Like, this is nice. Like, this is fun. And first of all, most people never look at bolts. It used to be a thing that it's like, keep an eye on those bolts. Like, I don't know about you, but sometimes you're up there and you're like screwing in the bolt so that the hanger doesn't pop. And you're like, oh God, like don't fall. Like this could be bad. But so thank you for taking that initiative. And I don't know, I want to keep tracing this story because now I can tell why you went from being a dirtbag to where you are now. It's because you're willing to stand up and raise your hand and say, oh, let's do this. And I like your ambition. You weren't like, hey, it'd be cool if like we redid our local area and just sold a couple of beers. It was, let's rebuild the world. All right. So take me on the next stop on your journey.
Well, we took on the bolting the roots was just a through line, kind of a purpose piece, right? And there's this intersection of passion that meets your excitement. You're excited about something, you're passionate about it, and it feels effortless to kind of continue down that path, right? None of these paths were very clear. Looking back on it now, it's funny because at the time I was just this like uneducated, non-college, no college education, left Alabama, which ranks 50th in education in the nation, right? It always comes in last for education. So no formal education. My grammar was incredibly poor. So any kind of business setting or meeting was terrible, frankly, because I had no business acumen. I had no ability to speak with those people, which, as a little tangent here, that became my superpower, was knowing the climbing world, really living it wholeheartedly, and then learning the business side of the industry, the outdoor industry, and the intersection of those two is much more rare than I anticipated it being, because most folks don't get into those outdoor worlds without that college degree that allows them to get in there. So they've missed that 4-year education came from college. My 4-year education came through like living in the back of my car and having nights with climbers and days with climbers, for years. So anyway, tangent there. But I've got a fun story. Maybe this will help kind of paint a little picture too. It's like leaving at 18, 19 years old from my parents' driveway, and my mom crying as I'm like waving me off, like this movie scene. I had bought a harmonica and packed my truck to live in it, and I was driving to Miguel's to go live at the Red.
Sweet.
For a season, right? And this was me like leaving the nest. I'd only heard of Miguel's. I didn't know what to expect. I thought it was to be like living in the woods of Kentucky, playing my harmonica by myself around the fire, eating beans over the fire top, right? And living in this climbing world. So I showed up at Miguel's late night after driving all day, and I couldn't hardly find a parking spot. It was like it was a very different world than I thought. And once again, kind of found those people who were doing amazing things and butted up to them. And they like educated me. They educated me how to cook, how to eat, how to climb. I don't know. There's like so many little pieces of my world came from going on that trip, meeting these people who were super influential, and really got my education in climbing, like through climbing, that community.
I think it's fascinating how the climate community, at least back when I was doing it, sounds like back when you were there too, if you're just kind of on the road and you just show up at a place, the truth is it might be crowded on Saturday and Sunday, but then Tuesday morning rolls around and it's empty. And like, if you're still there and you look around and you see that same guy or girl, you're like, oh, you're here too. And that is kind of the way into the community, is showing up at a time when only the people who are really committed are still going to be there. And I just love that idea of being shown the ropes by those who were there. And so you must have dove pretty headlong into the just ability of climbing at that point too, because I mean, if you're living it, and I know how strong you got, how long was that kind of performance oriented career for you?
Yeah. No, I was obsessed, going to sleep thinking about beta, waking up thinking about beta. It was nonstop climbing all the time in my mind. I also pretty early on lived with Jimmy Webb in Tennessee. He and I moved in together. We're friends early. So I was all immediately kind of thrown into the best of the best. And really think that has a huge help in my climbing at the time. Was, I jokingly, I got in trouble for this when I was younger in Alabama, but I was like, oh, if you want to slay dragons, you have to hang out with dragon slayers. Like you have to learn how to do that through the folks who can actually slay dragons. And to really bump your level up, for me at the time, I didn't know where those upper echelons were. And someone like Jimmy is building that bridge to showcase what's possible. And it makes it much easier for someone like me to walk that bridge behind him, So I wasn't paving the way of my performance. I was just kind of following in the footsteps of those, around me.
Dude, I am 100% on board. I just try to find the best of the best and follow along. It sounds kind of lame in the sense that if you're always finding those to follow behind, where when someone does a boulder or a climb in front of you, it just makes it easier. I don't know how else to put it. It just does. And the thing though that I always find interesting is when I look at the best of the best of the best, they somehow have this ability to go where no one has gone before and slay the dragon. Not just help slay the dragon, but find a new dragon too. And I keep using this analogy because I just like the idea of us slaying dragons. I don't know, makes Jimmy, if Jimmy didn't sound cool enough before, now he sounds very cool. I mean, you've been around all these best of the best. Like, what is the thread that allows them to go and tackle something new, like break new ground, reach into uncertainty? Because I know you're a great climber. I'm not terrible myself, but that's something I always admired with the people I would tag along with. They somehow had this vision to go to a world that they couldn't follow anyone because it was unknown.
Yeah. No, the mental game for these guys is the interesting piece, and it's hard to crack. Like, what makes it different for them? A lot of the top athletes just believe that they can do it, and they can see the path of how to get it done. I don't know if there's a secret sauce there, aside from they just truly believe in themselves. And saying that is one thing, but actually being in the moment and believing in yourself in that experience is a totally different thing. And you see the confidence in these guys. You see the level of, just belief they have that they can actually do it. And Jimmy at that time was like the early guy to start flashing these really hard grades, and seeing his confidence coming up to a boulder. And we all were like, oh yeah, he's definitely going to do this V12 first try, and at the time V12 was top echelon. And so he started building that new bridge between first try efforts and pushing that further and further. Like, I think Jimmy was one of the best at it at the time of flashing boulders. But then it really opened. It's like, oh, if this guy can do it first try, then the folks behind him feel confident they can do it over, a course of their years, their time trying this thing. Right. So it's kind of a weird intersection of just like belief in yourself and making shit happen. It's a weird one.
Well, I also want to give you credit where if you're even willing to climb with those people, there's some like deep belief that like you can keep up and you can, like if they can do it, I can do it too. And I always encourage people to be ridiculously optimistic and ridiculously realistic with themselves, where you want to climb with the best of the best and then have some like voice in your head that like, not only can I keep up, but if they can do it, I can do it. Maybe I can even do it better. But then when you can't do that V12 that Jimmy just flashed, being really honest with yourself and asking why and attacking those inabilities, wherever they may be, but still holding on at the same time to some unreasonable optimism. So yeah, I still want to give you credit for being like, I'll go slay a dragon too, dude.
Yeah. No, it's the most fun. Slaying dragons is the most fun. And being around those dragon slayers, it's exciting and inspiring and beautiful. Seeing people do what they're meant to do is incredible to be around. And, I get to be around that all the time. Well,
you became a pro or a professional athlete at some point, if I'm not mistaken. How'd that happen?
Yeah. So, the Action Fund gave me a little bit of a purpose to travel around, be at events. Found myself at the trade shows and outdoor retailer events back in the day, which was the kind of the who's who. Like, we saw Wu-Tang play at a very small group. It was like a Teva party. Outdoor retailer used to be wild. And especially as a young man at the time, it was a very wild time. So anyway, I'm kind of in these circles unknowingly with like, oh, what are we doing about bolts and anchors? What are we doing here? And that was my in. And then climbing, hard enough at the time, just, being in the mix, putting up new routes. I was helping bolt things, rebolt things. So I'm kind of found myself in all these little circles. And then that led to, getting some shoes and chalk, which is the classic start of things. And then going around feeling like a pro, but certainly not being professional, which we could talk about here later, what the intersection of pro and professional really is. And, it led me to getting this job through Black Diamond. Jonathan Desanga at the time, JT, was a big figure in the climbing world. He kind of took a liking of me and said, well, you're not good enough to be a professional athlete, and you're not in the space to go be a rep and sell the product. But let's make this hybrid role where you know the product super well, you attend these sales meetings, you're at the outdoor retailer shows, and you're still kind of a big fish in the little pond of your community. Like you're influential in this space, and became a brand advocate is the name of that role. And I think it was like $400 a month was my pay. And I was so stoked that I was getting paid to go do this thing. And, that job led me to being part of the Athlete Summit, being a part of all these different, the best of the best athletes in the world all coming together. And I really just kind of found my space working closer for them. And while I was there, I found myself at these events with these guys. I found myself helping more and like helping set up this stuff and breaking down this stuff and organizing things and driving the van and being useful in this space, because it's like my blue collar roots really gave me this ability to like, oh, I can see what work needs to get done. Let's do it. And I was like, quickly realized I'm better behind the curtain than I am in front of it. I'm better at like holding the spotlight than I am being in the spotlight.
I know that you love climbing. You wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be doing the job you're doing if you didn't deeply love climbing. Was it hard for you to say to yourself, like, I'm not going to be Jimmy Webb or Jimmy Chin. I'm going to be Tyler Willcutt, and I'm going to find my path in climbing? Because part of the kind of subtext of this whole part is like being able to make a living in climbing, even if you're not Adam Ondra or Alex Honnold, or pick those names off of one hand, because there's not that many who really make it. And you probably know by the time you're in your 20s if you're going to be one of those people. Like, was there a tension for you of being not in the limelight, but still kind of fighting your way in climbing, holding the limelight, as you said?
Totally. Not really. I just kept saying yes to the opportunities that felt aligned with my passions. It never really felt like I was making it, and certainly didn't anticipate to be sitting here today in this role. And I joked with you when we chatted before and said, I'm the person you talk to get a hold of these athletes. Like, I'm just kind of the middleman, jokingly like the drug dealer. I know how much, where the product is, how much the product is to move it, where it's going to be at any given time. And it was never feeling like I wasn't on my path to lead up here. It didn't feel like I was giving up this professional dream. I just didn't know the ways. I didn't know which path you can take. And being an agent for climbers wasn't on the menu of where do you see yourself in 5 years. I didn't know that was an option. And at the time, it really wasn't when I first started climbing. And I remember being with Jimmy Webb and Mikey Williams, who's a prolific developer in the New River Gorge, the guidebook author there. He's got a amazing van company now that he builds, custom vans. But Jimmy and Mikey and I were talking about this, and he was running Dead Point magazine at the time. He was the editor in chief and writer of Dead Point. Beautiful magazine. Used to love Dead Point.
Seriously,
and Jimmy was the best of the best in climbing. Mikey was the best writer and storyteller and understood video. And I was like, what am I doing here? What am I? They were talking with me and going like, yeah, you got to be good at something. We got to find your thing. And I didn't know what it was, but it was really just bringing community together, being able to communicate what that group is doing and why we're there. And, it was very small steps that was kind of really shaped by mentors in the community. And that's still kind of what I do today, is just making sure that these people who are heroes in this space are able to have their story told and shared for the people who need it and want it. Like some Southern Alabama boy who found climbing and then found inspiration through these people, and found myself, walking alongside them.
Quick break while I tell you about today's sponsor. You. That's right, you. Thank you to all the patrons who help make this show possible. Join them so you can get episodes early before anyone else, and those episodes are ad-free. As a patron,
You also get to submit questions for upcoming guests. The answers to those questions are only available to patrons. Follow the link in the show notes to join now. You also get access to a private Discord where you'll find me and other people who want to go from good to great. Okay, back to the pod. So how did that transition from being a brand ambassador, making literally hundreds of dollars, go to being an agent?
Yeah, so Black Diamond, that advocate role turned into me coming in and being a sports marketing coordinator. So most brands it's either a team manager or a sports marketing manager or director. It's kind of who's on the team is their responsibility and what is that team doing. So I came in as a sports marketing coordinator under JT. And that was a big moment for me because, once again, no education in marketing. I had no idea what these guys were saying. You know, they were using acronyms and this very business vocabulary heavy. I'm sitting in board meetings and listening in on this crazy stuff. I had no idea how business worked. I was just a proper climber, like coming in from living in a car for years, traveling around, and then found myself moving to Salt Lake City, being at the Black Diamond office and starting this 9 to 5. And that led to 5 or 6 years of working at Black Diamond. Ended up being the sports marketing lead there for 4 or 5 of those years. And through that process of working with BD and these athletes, you know, I'd managed the events, the athletes, and the philanthropic partnerships for climbing. And so I had this like really wide knowledge base of all these different worlds that happen within this climbing space. And we represented Alex Honnold. So I would meet with Alex's agents at the outdoor retailer show. And you could clearly see them coming because my boss, Jonathan Retzek, the founder, would show up wearing like a nice pea coat. He was super business savvy. Just like, you know, had a different look and feel to him when he came into the BD booth to sit down. And I was just this 26-year-old climber, and they're asking all these questions I have no answers for, and you know, terrified of these guys. And jokingly said, like, "Oh man, you guys represent some of the best climbers in the world, and you guys don't really know climbing. So you guys should just hire a climber to come in here and help out and like do this." And I was like, "Well, actually, you guys should hire me." And we all kind of laughed and you know, and like slapped each other on the back. And it was just this little moment. And then a couple months later, they called for an interview, and then got the job.
Dude, that's a good story. That's awesome. I like that you shot your shot, even if it was a joke. And I also have this image of like the suits arriving. You know, you're at like the OR or something, like no one's wearing the suit, and then someone shows up. I wish you had worn the suit today. Although you're pointing out that that's not you're the bridge, which is interesting. I don't know. I have this image of, you know, the behind the scenes marketing, all this stuff. You talk about acronyms and not kind of knowing what they're saying. I guess something that I would share as someone who's been in the corporate world, you know, been in business, like I have a degree and all that stuff. I actually think that if you know the lingo of something, it starts becoming not that complex. So it is an acronym and there's all these concepts baked into these words, but you don't have to be brilliant. You just have to understand what's being said, have some background, have some context, and then you can start seeing how those Lego pieces of words are fit together to create bigger concepts. And I just think it's good to put it out there that none of this stuff is magic. Someone from Alabama who is a climber, if you're interested in learning and excited, typically none of that stuff is rocket science. And I just think it's a good message to put out there that like having a blue collar work ethic, showing up, being a professional, not just a pro, can open up a lot of doors when you're willing to put your hand up to and put in the work.
100%. You know, I like to say that, you know, where your curiosity intersects with your usefulness, like that's your lane. Like if you're curious about this, if you're useful in this space, it's a great lane to be in. And it's really, like you said, just showing up, starting small, show up, where does help being needed? And if you keep kind of doing that with that through line of your curiosity taking you there, you're kind of unstoppable. You just got to be able to be okay with not knowing what you don't know, accepting that, and knowing that people typically are excited to share with you what they know. And that mentorship has been such a big through line for me, where these folks take you under your wing because you go like, hey, can you help me out here? Or like, what do you do? How do you handle this? And just having amazing people around you, and they're around, and they're eager to help and share that knowledge with folks.
So I think you just gave good advice there, but I'm also going to ask it more explicitly. You're really successful, Tyler. And when we tell this story in 15 minutes about you starting off as a aggressive repeller, a young kid being a dirtbag, in some ways we can just kind of connect these dots and make it seem obvious why you're successful now. But if you were to go back and meet young Tyler or someone who's coming up and is hungry but unsure where they're going, do you have any advice for people who want to make a living in climbing but may not be the athletic physical star?
Yeah, I think that the advice is the same for the top level professional and the beginner. It's just show up, be curious, and you don't have to be a 515 climber to have a 515 impact on your community, on your organization, on your team, on whatever you're doing. I think it truly is just showing up and putting in that work. But if you're curious about it, it feels like an obsession. Like people talk about discipline all the time and how you have to have this discipline. And most of those years of me living in the back of my truck and climbing nonstop never felt like it was a discipline. It was such a obvious, yes, this is what I have to do. If my body and skin would just be ready to go, I would climb every day. So it was just about, showing up, putting in the work and make it happen. But it was all with a through line of, this is what I'm excited about. This is what I want to do.
I like that kind of downplaying discipline. How I put this without it sounding like bad advice. I just found that when I was younger, I equated flogging myself and hating what I'm doing and discipline with success, where I've had more success when I kind of just can't stop doing the thing, like whatever the thing may be. But then there is some kind of balance there where when I really want to climb a climb, but I need to, sleep well, maybe train a little bit for it. Like I wouldn't call that fun, but it doesn't exactly feel like discipline because there's this kernel of motivation that's just, it's not even hard for me to show up and train. Like I'm somehow compelled. And I find it interesting how there's always this balance between really leaning into what you love and can't help but do, but then also balancing it with kind of that, well, maybe that's a good segue into that pro versus professional and still showing up even when it's not 100% fun, but you understand how it's connected to that larger goal.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think, pro and professional, it's my like go-to saying for folks who like, how do I get a start as a professional climber, or a pro climber? And, I always say like pro is ability and professional is reliability. There's just this thing where you show up and you professionally like honor your commitments. You represent your partners well, you represent yourself well, you're true to yourself. You're not chasing anybody else's dream, anybody else's story, because you can kind of follow in footsteps and do that, but it's really difficult to kind of pave your own path, right? And doing that in terms of being professional and building that longevity, turning a moment into momentum is another big thing for a professional. Right? You have a big moment, but you move that thing forward. It becomes this through line of why you did what you did and who you are is true. And living that true life is the important through line. And professionals, they show up with a plan. They're organized. They're ready to go. You could do it both ways. You could just be a pro and go climbing all the time and get product and get some money and do the thing. But the professionals are the ones who are going to have a super long career in the space, and are going to really break through.
Can you give me an example of that idea of turning a moment into momentum? I found that interesting because people will have kind of you'll see a story come out on 8a.new and you go like, oh, that's interesting, and then you never hear from them again.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest one, I think, to talk about, well, a good one here that just came out is Emily Harrington's Girl Climber documentary. It just came out. And that's a perfect example of kind of what a professional athlete does and what a manager and agent does for those people is, this goal that Emily had of doing, the first 24-hour ascent as a female on this specific route on El Cab, going after it season after season. I don't know if you've got to see it yet, but she takes some of the gnarliest slams, gnarliest falls, really injured, lots of doubt coming in if she can do this thing, and so many moments of not wanting to succeed, and me even knowing the story, being like, is she going to keep going? Like, this is crazy. And I think that was 2020-ish or 21. I forget what year she did that now. And that turned into her getting on TV station news and the Joe Rogan podcast, and it was the Kelly Clarkson show, like all these crazy moments where she really took that one moment and turned it into a big momentum push. And that leads to new brand partnerships, that leads to speaking engagements and having a storyline to have for keynotes, and, having this through line here that's now yours. And it turns out to be a feature-length documentary that follows her whole story that just came out on IMAX just a few months ago. And yeah, it just turns this whole moment into momentum, where now she has this like clear path of what she has done, a thing that she really worked hard for, put in the time and effort, tons of reasons to stop, continued. And that's really the piece that people get really excited about, is seeing the human potential being pushed to their max.
Good for her. I just love seeing success, and I love seeing it cross this chasm between climbing and like the broader world. You work with the best of the talents in our sport, and it seems like one of the defining things about them is that they cross this chasm and appeal to a broader audience. And I don't know, this is kind of this X factor thing that we were talking about. Like, how do these athletes appeal to the whole world instead of, break out of just the kind of climbing confines?
Yeah. I mean, I think the authenticity of climbing, it's like real people doing real hard things for the right reasons. I think that just resonates beyond the sport. The motivational things, like the Rocky films, as an example, like the most motivating thing isn't the fight at the end. It's like the Rocky montage of him getting fit and training hard and chasing the chicken. And, like those are the things that I would watch for my motivation. It's like people really putting in the effort and doing something that seems true to them is, it just resonates with the mainstream. Tommy in the Dawn Wall, perfect example of like him being an amazing partner, a great leader. He could have continued on. He didn't know if his buddy was going to do it. And him staying, knowing that the rain's coming to support Kevin, was like the breakthrough. That's just who Tommy is. That through line stands out, where you're not crafting a story. You're not trying to make this thing where it's going to be, it's going to resonate with people. It's just who Tommy is. So that through line of like knowing exactly who you are, having those morals and values and living true to those, like that just transcends to any human.
I just find this so interesting that what we all are attracted to is people actually being themselves. And if Emily was trying to make a popular movie about doing El Cap, it somehow like wouldn't work, because she would have given up after taking that fall and getting really hurt. It's like there's all these reasons to not do the thing, but if it's really this intrinsic motivation, somehow we love it. And also I would point out, like, if you had decided at 16 you were going to be, the amazing agent for amazing climbers, like it probably wouldn't have worked out. You kind of have to just go and rebolt the world, and somehow that leads there. And I don't know how to give people advice to be themselves either. It's something that sounds so easy and flippant and cliche, but when you see it, you know it, and that's what's attractive.
Absolutely. I mean, the best athletes are those people. And we talk about that X factor, and it's unique. The X factor really is knowing who you are and what you represent. And that sounds trite. It sounds easy, and it's extremely hard to do. You have to be so sure of yourself. And yeah, I mean, those guys, they're so good at it, but it's not polished. It's just, It's connection, it's consistency. It's just showing up, knowing why you're doing what you do is a huge part of it. Just the why behind you.
So when you meet someone like that and bring them on the team, and then they're chasing after things like Dawn Wall or Free Solo, any of these, what's your guys' role? Like, how do you help that story come out cleanly? Because even when someone is just living authentically and doing their thing, I don't know if that always comes across perfectly. Like, there needs to be a team that helps communicate. And so, yeah, how do you figure out who to work with, who to partner with, how to share that story in the right way that both the athlete is happy with and the brands that they're supporting or they're supporting them is happy with?
Yeah, it's a great question. Really what we do is once we find these people, that most of the time it's just who inspires us, like who's doing the things that we really think are badass and we're stoked on and they seem like amazing and good, honest people. And then you just find the brands and the production companies and the PR agencies and the events that all align with who they are. And you just keep finding those similar people and keep putting them together. And then those teams feel unstoppable. So it's similar things. It's similar to those people who are sure of who they are and why they're doing what they're doing and have that vision. And we just get in that world of helping pull those peoples into the same room, into the same conversations. And that typically leads to amazing things. Through that, though, there's a lot of our like hands-on management where there's tons of little nuances to climbing that's difficult to get around to the mass media. So we do a lot of fielding these questions and figuring out how to make things not kooky, not being a Gumby in this sense, right? Like, you guys want to do this thing and share this story. You want to use this incredible athlete and their image and name and trust that they bring to the table. And we help kind of bring a very messy idea into a clear vision with the intersection of knowing both worlds, knowing the business world and their objectives and plans and what's true to this athlete and who they are. And we just connect those dots.
How do these athletes deal with the expectations or the pressure that must be put on them? We were talking about Dawn Wall, which was a multi-year effort. And actually in the middle of one of those years, I was out in Spain and I ended up climbing with Kevin, Tommy's partner, on there. And I was giving him crap, dude. I was trying to get him to come out and join me in Mallorca. He was like, "Oh no, dude, that's like the same season as, the project that we're working on." And I literally was like, "Kevin, you're just like swinging around some ropes there. You guys have been doing this forever. Like, come on, like Mallorca is dope. You're going to love it." And he was like, "No, dude, I'm doing this." But then sometimes those things don't work out. I mean, you're a climber. You get to talk to these guys. Like, how did you help them deal with the pressure? What kind of pressure do they get put under?
Without an agent and a manager as a starting point, that can be much, much more difficult for the athlete because they're fielding all of their emails. They're making sure their finances are in line. They're working on new business. They're pitching themselves, trying to get partners to be interested in them or know who they are, know their story, or line up production companies. Like, all that stuff takes a lot of time. It's full time and maxed overload crew over here at RXR that works really hard in all these different ways. So to do that as your own individual style and continue to perform at the highest level is the crux, right? You have to run your business and be the business. And most of the time that doesn't really equal a lot of success for folks. And this kind of, rock climbing space we're talking about. A lot of them learn, climbing is one of the best at teaching you how to deal with pressure. You have this thing fully dialed. You've done all these moves, and then you're still cruxing at the top. You're still falling off on this one section. You're scared here when you know it's safe. Like, all these things, you constantly failing and trying and failing and trying and dealing with all these circumstances. So it's a really good lesson of how to deal with pressure in the business world. Like, most of our guys joke that they've done so much intense, scary things that when they get on stage to talk, or they're back in the green room and what snacks do you want? It's like, we're good, man. Like, we suffer all the time. This is easy. And a lot of the times that's the case. It's like they have their own pressures more than they do external pressures, really. Their pressure to succeed, their pressure to do the thing that they want to do, is the biggest piece. Like, most brands aren't really pushing people to do the next hard thing. That's not really what's happening. As coming from a sports marketing manager before at Black Diamond, I'm not like pushing people to excel, to do something bigger or scarier or harder. It's always like, what are you guys excited to do? And hearing, they're the ones coming up with that stuff. But, there's pressures of being on podcasts like this and showing up and feeling like you have the right answers, to be, being true to yourself.
Yeah. I think it's funny. It made me think of when I talked to Alex Honnold, and he got on a soapbox and he was like, go get scared. Like, this is not scary. Missing your flight is not scary. Yeah. Probably doing a keynote, to a big group, not scary. Being 1,000 feet up, that's scary. You just said something about how the brands aren't knocking on athletes' doors and saying, hey, like, go bigger, go harder. If ability and hard sends isn't that big a focus or that tightly coupled with the success of an athlete, what are the brands looking for? Like, how do we think about what makes a good athlete for a brand, if it's not just sending hard?
Yeah, I think the focused version of that answer is just simply trust. You build trust. You have trust in who you are, and what you represent is authentic. Like, we all know Alex, and we trust that what he says is truthful. Like, he almost doesn't have another gear. It's like, he doesn't have another gear. He doesn't understand how not to be completely blatantly honest.
I love that about him, by the way.
Me too.
Sorry to interrupt you. I love that.
We all do. That's the best part of Alex, is he's 100% himself, 100% honest. And you trust, if he's promoting something, or if he says this thing is good, that is true. And we as managers try to protect him from not having things that he doesn't believe is true, and try to just say that they are, right? It just breaks that credibility. So, I think being an amazing communicator and storyteller is really the thing that these brands are looking for most of the time. They want you to be able to tell a good story and share that why, which builds that trust to be able to promote whatever you're doing. Because the nuances at the highest level of like pushing the extreme sports, it's changed. Like, we see it in climbing right now. There's guys who don't even know their names, who are doing almost doing sleepwalker in a session, doing V17 boulders, and I've never even heard of them. And my whole world has been surrounded by who are the up and comers, who are the best of the best. And out of nowhere, you get, we joked, Will Bosey all of a sudden was never on my radar, and top dog. He's out there playing on silence. Now he's Will Bosey. And it's just happening so quickly. And it kind of brings me back to that point of the bridge builders and the bridge walkers. There's so many of these people that we know that are in our world, in our orbit, that have built those bridges along the way. And now this new generation is able to walk that bridge quickly and then start their own extension of that bridge and push that forward.
I just want to plus one again what you said about Alex Honnold, because I just did a pod with him, and we are climbing right beforehand, and we sit down, we turn on the camera, and there was no change in him whatsoever. And just it's funny because people listening might think like, oh, well, yeah, why would there be a change? But it's harder than you think to just be congruent across all facets, whether he's on a microphone in front of 10,000 people, on a free soloing on a wall, on camera, wherever the case may be. That congruency is difficult, but it ties into what you're saying, where you build trust and you have a why and that storytelling. So I want to go into that storytelling a little bit more, because if you climb hard, great, but it's like, why are you climbing hard? And actually even understanding yourself, why you're doing what you're doing, and then be able to be authentic and tell that story and why that's so appealing. And all this is a question around, how is this new era require people to tell their story, and what's the role of athletes in doing that, and how can they get better at just, I know that's such a key component in what we do now, or not we, what they do now. And just, can we talk a little bit more about storytelling and how that can be done effectively?
Yeah, storytelling's a unique one, right? Because it's like we all know those guys who are great storytellers, but don't have the skills to be the top climbers. We also know the best climbers that have we don't know them personally at all. We don't feel like we have any understanding who they are. Well, I forget the gentleman's name. He's a Spanish climber. Is it Jorge? Jorge.
Jorge Diaz. I'm not blanking on his last name, or his
exactly.
Amazing climber. Amazing climber.
And dude, you are a podcaster in the climbing space. I'm an agent in the climbing space. I can't still say his name correctly and know anything about this guy. I've never heard him talk. I don't know what his style is off the rock. I have just seen him put up more 515s and have some of the best tick lists I've ever seen out there, fully pushing the sport. And he's not on anybody's radar. He's not on anybody's top 10 of who you think is the best climbers out there. It's just weird. So it's there's no clear distinction on like what that X factor is that brings you in and what really makes you stand out differently as a storyteller.
Jorge, please come on the pod and tell us if we're saying your name wrong. I'm impressed with your tick list. But that is a really good point. And I think it's something that people often don't want to hear, where that's part of being a professional. So I did a podcast with Chris Sharma, another one of your athletes, one of my just superstars, idol for as long as I can remember, from day one in climbing. And something that Chris talked about was how early on he just kind of had people around him that helped him tell his story. He had the Lowell brothers, Peter Mortimer, and just that there was this synergy with like the team and being able to tell his story. And, there was probably some luck involved there. Chris was also a standout, but in today's world, the good and the bad is that anyone can be a storyteller, which maybe allows you to not have someone pick you and say, hey, we're going to make you the star of this story. But also then the onus becomes put on your shoulders, where if you're not a big star yet, you can kind of make yourself a star by telling a story. And I don't know what it's like in today's world, but it seems very different from what it was 20 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, social media being the obvious one, anybody can pop over their phone and immediately talk to, a huge world connected to everybody. And we've seen those people kind of come and go, the quote unquote influencers who come in, make a big splash. They're super tech savvy. They're great content creators, and that's awesome. And there's a space for you there. That's what's amazing about the growth of climbing. Is we see this happen where there's so many different lanes now that you can get into. You could either be the top echelon performance pusher. You could be the storyteller, a person who's, filming those people, who's the setters, the people at these companies designing this product, building the product, the event world. Like there's the developers. There's so many different facets of this space where you can really just find what excites you and double down on it and keep moving that way. So if you're not a great storyteller, you're incapable of talking on camera. That's kind of why I've avoided podcasts most of my life, or any kind of interviews and things. Like I'm so much better behind the curtain than I am in front.
You're a natural. No.
No, I get it. And, slightly uncomfortable doing this. And I kind of did it for the sake of, I send my athletes out with all this confidence that I try to tell them, remind them of who they are, dealing with hardships, dealing with situations. They all have lives, they have families, they have the same things we all go through. We kind of forget that part of the human aspect of these guys and put them up on a pedestal, but they're all dealing with the same things we are. So we as managers come in and just kind of help coach them through those moments in life. And you got into the Olympics and you slip early and you don't make a medal, you don't get the goal you're going after. And then there's tons of cameras in your face, and there's tons of, companies that supported you that now you have to like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't do this. And it's like, nope. This is part of the game. This is part of the path. This is part of those moments, and the same thing as I'm doing now, feeling uncomfortable in the situations of kind of memorializing the moment that we're in. the same as we have Facebook, and I have my Facebook reminders of like 12 years ago pop up, and I'm like, who was that person?
Well, I think it's good that one of the reasons why you ended up where you are is because you had the experience and empathy of climbing at a high level. And I like this idea that you're like, okay, I'm going to see what it's like when you guys go on the podcast or get the microphone in your face. Having that knowledge is just important to understand what everyone's going through. And I want to go back to this storytelling and point out something that I think is really important, where I've seen a lot of hate from high-end climbers about influencers, where it's like, oh, this person has 300,000 YouTube followers and they only climb V8 or V10 or even like V13 because, like these guys are climbing V17. But I think that what you said there was really good, where climbing is growing and there's room for more ways to express that. And rather than looking at as being like a zero sum pie where it's like, you have to be the best and then you get everything, there's room for other people to find their niche and grow it and have influence or an impact in their own way, rather than it's just like either you are the genetic freak and the best of the best and maybe you're risking your life. That's kind of a sad thing if you're 8 and you are psyched on climbing and literally there's only 2 spots for you to grow into, versus what we talked about in the beginning of this podcast, where like Tyler wanted to showcase that someone like you can love climbing and continue to love climbing and love the industry and find your way, even if you're not, the whatever, pick your superstar's name.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I want to ask more about where climbing is headed, because we just said climbing is growing. Is climbing growing? Like, how's it all look? Is the future bright for climbing and these big talents, or is it not?
Yeah, I think it's only just begun. I think we're still in our early days of where climbing's going to be. The mainstream moment is arriving. I think the Olympics was kind of a piece of that. Free solo had a big moment of pushing that into the mainstream, of explaining what climbing actually is, even though that's a very different subset of climbing. My mom's still scared that every time I tell her I'm climbing, I'm doing what Alex is doing. But climbing's mainstream moment's here. And I think the next era is going to be more about the depth, where it's going to dive into more of the community, that inclusion, the purpose. It's expanding where climbing is unique, where women are just as good as the men in a lot of these spaces. Yanya's and just unbelievable in the competitive world. And we've seen this time and time again. Lynn Hill doing the nose first free is unbelievable. Like, there's all of these through lines where it's very diverse in the sport. There's tons of richness to come out, and these mainstream brands and networks and streamers all kind of want to keep telling these stories. So I think we're just at the beginning of where it is. I think it is a bright future.
Awesome. I'm glad you're optimistic. That makes me happy. It would be a bummer if you're like, yeah, we kind of peaked. It's head downhill. You said streamers or streaming. I think what you're talking about is not YouTube. You're talking about Netflix, HBO, Hulu, these big giant platforms. And that makes me wonder about, where is the majority of income coming for the top talents? And I know this is always like, disclaimer, you guys, I'm sure people want me to ask like extremely specific questions. How much does X person make from it? We can't do that. That's not appropriate. But I'm going to try to dance around it and just understand more about the industry by asking questions like, where is the majority of income coming for climbing or these top talents? Yeah,
for the top talent, right, the brand partnerships are kind of your foundation almost all the time. It's your apparel partners, your food and nutrition, your watch brands, your car, your airline, your climbing equipment. These are kind of the foundational long-term partnerships that you've built. Oftentimes, these guys have, I think Conrad's headed towards a 50-year career with the North Face. Just unbelievable in any world for people to work 50 years in that space. So, your brand partnerships are almost everybody's kind of core foundational place for income. And then that often moves into a few different places, and whichever ones that excite you the most. So it can be, we like to call it the flywheel moment. Like, you have a big moment, say you do the Dawn Wall, that turns into a documentary where, and all the press and PR that comes around that. The documentary then goes big, goes into theaters, comes into people's homes, becomes kind of a hallmark story for yourself. And then that turns into speaking engagements, which is another line of this. So you can do the corporate talks, you can do small climbing events. There's just paid opportunities there, and continues back into another moment that you would then continue that flywheel around. It's kind of your biggest pieces, and podcasts, books. We help with all those things, getting those off the ground. Yeah, those are kind of the main buckets that you play with.
It must be tough to have a moment, have something that is big, and then understand how to keep that flywheel going. And like it must be this interesting conversation with you guys where maybe athletes have these different ideas. They're like, I'm attracted to this climb or this competition or whatever the case may be. Is there like kind of a bouncing ideas back and forth of this seems like a good one to keep the flywheel going? Or is it just totally athlete directed? Or maybe it depends on the athlete.
It all depends. I mean, even just this week, like literally this week, we've had Jim Morrison just skied off of the north side of Everest down the hardest, unskiable piece. Jimmy Chin was filming it in documentary with Jimmy and Chai. And then you have Adrian Ballinger. These are all clients of ours, of RXR. Adrian was the base camp manager and kind of organizing that trip, and kind of his guiding service was leading on it with a bunch of different people from his organization. So this whole thing, all of a sudden, we've got a documentary film. We've got Jim doing the first descent of Everest. It is insane. Next to that, we had an announcement that Alex is going to climb the skyscraper in Taipei 101. That's a huge moment. And then the girl climber came out for streaming. All this week, 3 of our clients have huge moments in their careers, and have, that just kicks off the flywheel of the different things that are ahead. So it's, without support, without help, it can be difficult to do it on your own. But with us helping get the right people in place, then, things can kind of keep moving themselves forward.
Is there anything that climbing can learn from other more established sports that, it sounds like we're still developing, we're having our moment, you're optimistic. I'm not sure which sport to point at, but again, it may be like some other adventure, outdoor oriented sports, but is there something that we do poorly that we're working on, or just where does climbing still need to grow and learn from others in?
Well, it makes me think of the birth of mellow. To me, mellow climbing came where I was struggling with finding what community meant to me, what climbing represented for me through these brands' YouTube channels. Like Real Rock had it in a sense. Like I would look forward to Real Rock every year, and those would be kind of the hallmark stories and people that I'm interested in and excited about. But then social media came along. There's tons of noise. It's hard to kind of know, like if I say I'm a climber, where do I point somebody to for them to see what that means, And to me, that's where mellow came from. It was like, and I watched those films, when I watched those mellow videos, I'm like, oh, this is what I get excited about at climbing. This is like what I think about when I think about climbing. And I think what they do is they're honest, they show their frustrations. They're cussing and rapping and playing and joking, they're being creative, and they're being kind of the oddballs they are. And it feels true. It feels honest. It feels real. And it feels like friends. It feels like people that I want to spend time with. And I feel like I'm at the boulders with those guys whenever I'm watching those videos, And I think what we have done poorly is kind of try to force it into this rigid structure of storytelling and content creation that doesn't really let the authenticity shine through. And that word is so trite these days, right? It's just overused and overplayed, but it's truly said so often because it is a core component of what's missing is this authentic trust, this through line that comes out. And there's no more authentic side of climbing to me these days with media than mellow, because I think they just do it exactly how they do it. There's no filter. And so, yeah, I think remove the filters, stop trying to force it into what you think is the correct style for content, and really show what it's like to be a climber.
I talked to Josh Lowell. I was talking about Real Rock, or I can't remember the dosages early on. And something that he said that he was trying to capture was just, he's like, what we're doing is cool. Like, I want to show like, this is awesome. This is badass. This is cool. Let's get it out there. And again, I like this idea of, authentic storytelling. I hate it. It does sound too trite. It does sound the thing, but if you're out there doing awesome stuff, capturing it is really important. I've heard there's sometimes athletes think that our climbing culture and our brands aren't supporting them enough. And what my question for you, as someone who has seen across multiple sports and disciplines, is kind of like, is that true? Is climbing putting the commensurate percentage of their marketing budget towards their athletes in comparison to, say, like surfing? Or is climbing like an outlier and they don't support their athletes? Like, it's one thing to hear grumblings from the ground where, of course, people want more money, but I think it's better to look at it in comparison to the broader market.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, a couple of things are happening here. I think the explosion of climbing, where there's gyms in every city, so many gyms in every city these days. There's gyms all over. So access to climbing has really changed. There's tons and tons of people who are doing it recreationally. It's mentioned in movies. The recent Jurassic Park, which was a terrible movie, came out, and she's like, oh, it looks like a 5'14", maybe 5'15" slab. She's like, they're using some of the vernacular, but still incorrectly. It's so crazy. There's all of these things. It's an explosion happening now. The Olympics, so all these big brands are coming in and they're checking it out. But the climbing world has just grown so much, where there's so many top level athletes in this space, that it's quite difficult for all of them to be supported by this small number of brands that are actually making the stuff that they're talking about. When it comes to climbing shoes or climbing equipment, there's very few that are actually bringing those products to life, and so it's difficult to give everybody who may deserve it an opportunity. So that's cruxy. But when you compare it to other sports, other disciplines, other things, I do think it is in line for where it should be, and it's going to continue to grow as it matures. And as athletes mature, as media matures, as all these things kind of become more professional, it's going to be easier for people to make a living. And as we said at the top of the show, it's like, it could be whatever your path is, right? It might not be the Olympian, and maybe medals don't mean anything to you. Maybe you're ice climbing and you're doing these crazy water ice routes. Whatever your path is, I think there's going to be a place for you, but you might have to expand your knowledge base a bit and learn how to be better at business, learn how to be better at communication, at storytelling. There's coaches you can hire to do this. There's mentors that you can buddy up with and get information from. And I take calls all the time just to answer these questions of like, how do I start getting paid if I'm not making money yet as an athlete? And there's no one right answer. It just depends on what you're great at, what you're excited about, and which path you want to go down. And try to be realistic with all of those things. Make sure that you're being honest and you're walking your path and not somebody else's.
The kind of meta thing there that you're saying is that there's more to it than just climbing hard, and being open to storytelling, business acumen, not just going and pulling down hard. And I just think that's, again, that the difference between being professional and pro. And it's like, if you want to be a professional, you got to act like a professional. And I think that's just something that's really important to put out there for when you're younger and you think that all it is to just be the best climber in the world. But if you look at LeBron James or something, I guarantee you he plays a lot of basketball. But I guarantee you he works on a lot of other stuff than just basketball to be the superstar that we know him as.
100%.
Okay, you mentioned Conrad Anker having a 50-year career, coming up on 50 years with the North Face, which is incredible. But something that I'm seeing is that a lot of these athletes who are really performance oriented, they're amazing, they're the best of the best, they're starting to age out of our sport. And what does that look like for our industry? Is there any solution? Do you have any recommendation for people who may not be putting up the hardest lines anymore and are not at the cutting edge? Like, how is our sport going to handle that? Or what advice do you have for those that are in that state right now?
Yeah, well, the beauty of these long-term athletes is they've been just so foundational to the history of those brands they're working with, and a lot of the times they're just the mavens, right? They're just continuing that message of what's happened in the past, what's worked, what hasn't worked, the history, and they're having these conversations with their leadership at these organizations, and they're an influential voice on what is authentic to that brand, to their values, to their mission, reminding them of those things. They sometimes help with bringing certain athletes to the table, getting certain people into certain other roles. So there's like a whole kind of legacy athlete space here that these folks can go into. And still, there's, like, as we said, as the continuation of the industry grows, we need people shooting these films, being riggers. We need people out supporting these brands and athletes by mentoring, shepherding the next folks on. The corporate speaking business is great for the older athlete who has a lot of stories to tell and histories to share. So there's always a path for folks. It's not like in some sports you kind of end your career and you're done and you're out. And the beauty about climbing is people climb well into their 60s at a very high level, and you can have a very long career in this space. And along the way, you learn new things that excite you, and you can kind of dive into those rabbit holes as far as you want.
That's good to hear. It's good that there's opportunities that are presenting themselves for those people. Yeah, it's just something that I worry about, because I think when I look at something like basketball or one of these big mega sports where oftentimes it seems like they earn so much money because it's a larger sport that they can hopefully kind of retire and maybe they aren't billionaires, but they have enough money that they saved up during their time, where because climbing is a bit of a fledgling sport, I'm not so sure that everyone is making enough money. They might be making $400 a month like you started at. And I'm not so sure you're going to be socking away a bunch for your retirement. But I think that encouragement of having them be mavens, tell their story, usher in the next generation, and work with brands to help them do that is, I don't know. I hope it's happening. I don't know. I'm concerned though. I still worry about my friends who are starting to age out of the sport.
Yeah, no, I think there's always a path for you.
Okay. You said a little something like you have these conversations with people often who are, looking to make it, or they have questions. How can people get in touch with you? Or do you even want people to get in touch with you? Is it more of a, don't call me, I'll call you just giving you the opportunity to put your information out there in case you want to.
Yeah, well, I mean, who knows what Pandora's box I'm opening here, but if I was going to do this, typically people who, that goes to the professional side. Like if you are looking for us, you're going to find us, we're not difficult to find. RXR Sports, we work with all these amazing athletes, and, you can find us there and email us there and get a hold of us. But those who show up, and I've been in the world for a long time now, so I've just got a lot of friends of friends who connect me via text, and, oh, you should speak at this person. You and I spoke earlier, and we're mentioning a few athletes you've had on the podcast. You're like, oh, you should keep your eye on these folks. Things just organically come up. And I've had so many people help shepherd me along and mentor me that if I have any opportunity to help out folks by giving some advice, I'm always happy to. And, there's no one size fits all for any of this stuff. It takes a conversation, a bit of understanding of who they are, what they're wanting to do, and then talk through it.
I like that. You basically just said, don't call me, I'll call you. But it makes me think of this thing. I think this happens in like Silicon Valley with these big VC firms. It's like the first test is, do you know someone who will introduce you? Because when we traced your career path, you were standing up, raising your hand, doing things like putting together fundraisers. You were already making your mark. And so then when you ask for the introduction, or it's like, hey, I'd like to talk to this person, you have a mutual friend because you've been living it. You've been showing up, putting in the time, doing that hard work. And so I think it's a little good message beneath all that.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay, Tyler, how do you go from good to great?
Been thinking about this one a good bit. It's a fun question. And I've got two answers for you. One, I don't think greatness exists. I don't think there's such thing as great. I don't, in one side of it, I think it's just people who are living at the intersection of their truth, passion, and purpose. And it's never something you arrive at. You don't arrive at greatness. You're continuously striving for greatness. So that's one side of it. I think greatness doesn't exist. What are you talking about? I also can think that if I had to say, like, define what greatness is, it's the people who last are the ones that live their truth and not chasing somebody else's. I think, at the end of the day, if you don't really love your story, love who you are, love what you're doing, then that greatness isn't going to shine through. And doing so, as we said, it's difficult. It sounds so easy, but one of the hardest things to do is to be yourself. And that can be your greatness, right? But it's like that beautiful overlap of what you love and what you're best at. And that's going to show up differently. So to some people, it's medals. To some people, it's their local boulder at the gym that's going to be reset in 3 weeks. It depends on what you're defining as your own greatness to really achieve it. But yeah, I don't think greatness exists.
The thing I want to add to your great answer is that if you want to find out what you're meant for, what you're passionate for, or who you really are, you do that by going out and trying things and raising your hand, putting in the work, exploring different disciplines. It doesn't really occur to you when you are sitting on the couch watching YouTube. I think that you have to get out there and try things. Yeah, I don't know. I think that can be a misnomer where people think that the path to authenticity is by sitting there and thinking about where I think when you look at all the people, whether it's your story or whether it's your athlete story, it's a repeated being out there in the world and iterating. And maybe that also connects with there is no greatness because you're always finding out more about who you are and what your next step should be. So don't sit around and hope it comes and knocks on your door. Get out there and look for it.
Absolutely. One of our clients, Rich Roll, amazing podcaster, Rich has a mantra that mood follows action. And I love that because, the mood follows action in the sense of sitting on the couch watching YouTube videos about these people, wondering why you haven't gotten your chance. If you continue to put action towards that thing, your mood will change. It will be more focused, more excitable, more clear of your why. And even just getting up and taking a walk, that mood follow action is a kind of a beautiful mantra I really value and think it helps a lot of people.
Yeah. Good advice. You lived it. You went from dirtbag climber in Alabama to representing the best of the best of the best that our sport has to offer. And I hope your story inspires those to follow along in your footsteps in their own way by getting up and trying things.
Yeah. And don't give up on those repellers. I think they're going to break through. I think the repelling's making a comeback. Those out there who are super stoked on the safety 8s, don't give up on those devices.
I just want to see you up there on Taipei 101, just rappelling right beside Alex. Just, dude, you're missing out, Alex. You could be just flying down this thing rather than climbing up so slow. Okay, Tyler, good stuff. I'm going to ask you a couple of Patreon questions now. If you want to hear that Q&A and other extra behind-the-scenes content from this episode and others,
head over to patreon.com/testpiece to sign up now. Patrons also get their episodes early and ad-free. There's hours and hours of bonus content there to help you on your own path of going from good to great. Still not sure? There's a free 7-day trial for you to check it out. And to help the show grow, please share this episode with someone who would love it. Okay, see you next week.